The Rules Committee, and I welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you doing this today. And as you said in your opening comments, it's unfortunate, but most members on this committee know someone who's been affected by the drug overdose problem and epidemic plaguing our country. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 2022, there were more than 107,000 overdose deaths that occurred in the United States. 67% of those deaths involved a synthetic opioid like fentanyl. These record numbers are due in large part to increasing presence of fentanyl and, in some cases, fentanyl analogues, which are approximately 100 times more potent than morphine and 50 times more potent than heroin. The lethal dose of fentanyl is just 2 milligrams, or about 4 grains of sand. A loophole cartels used prior to the temporary listing of analogues to traffic fentanyl into our country was to create fentanyl analogues. The cartels did this in an attempt to evade our criminal laws. Right now, fentanyl analogues are considered Schedule I substances, but only because of a series of temporary scheduling orders which expire on December 31st of 2024. Since then, since we've started these temporary rolling scheduling, we have seen a reduction in trafficking of the fentanyl analogues into our country. What basically happens is that the cartels, recognizing that the punishment is just as severe for bringing in the fentanyl analog as it might be for the fentanyl, they don't bother to try to figure out ways to get around our laws. But before we had these laws, Mr. Chairman, what would happen is they would scheme up a way, whether they be in China or in Mexico, to change the chemical formula ever so slightly so that they could claim in court, as they did so in several cases, but in one specific case, tried to claim that it wasn't covered by the statute. And so that's why we need this bill, to make sure that it's permanently out there and dissuade the criminal cartels and the drug pushers from trying to figure a way around the law, because we want to block that loophole that existed at one time and could exist again. So since we started that, we have seen a reduction in the trafficking of the fentanyl analogues into our country. This bill aims to curb overdose deaths by permanently scheduling fentanyl analogues as Schedule I substances. This will strengthen law enforcement's ability to prosecute fentanyl traffickers and act as a deterrent. The HALT Fentanyl Act also promotes research, and this is something you don't get in the temporary order. It promotes research into the various analogs by removing barriers to that research. In the Energy and Commerce Committee, we have heard that there are as many as 4,800 different potential analogs for fentanyl. Our experts at the NIH, FDA, and other agencies have studied roughly 30 of those 4,800 analogs. By encouraging research of Schedule I substances like the fentanyl analogs, we can better understand how these substances work and how we can prevent potentially harmful impacts in the future, and we may actually find something that's positive. We don't expect to, but we might. Because fentanyl has a proven medical use, it is considered a Schedule II. So fentanyl itself is a Schedule II narcotic. But illicit derivations or derivatives of fentanyl, also called fentanyl analogs, currently have not demonstrated medical value. Let me be clear, this bill will have no impact whatsoever on a physician's ability to administer fentanyl in proper medical scenarios. HALT deals specifically with the analogs, not fentanyl itself. DEA has said that permanently scheduling fentanyl analogs is their top legislative priority, and that's in this administration. We must address this bipartisan issue immediately and not allow this temporary extension to expire. Just today, and this is why I say it's bipartisan, just today the Biden administration released a statement regarding the bill we are discussing. In that statement, they supported the two provisions that I've just described, permanent scheduling and streamlined research. So previous to today, the Biden administration also had recommended a few other items they would like to see for fentanyl analogs. I'm open and willing to have those discussions, but that is not this bill. We should vote to advance this bill where we have commonality with the White House and it makes common sense. Now, I'm going to tell you that this bill, once we've passed this bill, we can continue to work on other issues. But let me address a couple of the issues, Mr. Chairman, that have been raised. We've dealt with the fact that some folks tried to scare people into thinking you couldn't use fentanyl for medical purposes. That's not the case. Further, it's correct that this bill does not solve all of the fentanyl issues out there or all of the drug issues out there. If it were to solve that, I would say fabulous. But it's very difficult to come up with a single bill that would solve all of our problems. And I would submit to find that perfect bill, you would be like those who chase the end of the rainbow looking for that pot of gold. It's not likely to happen in one fell swoop. What we need to do is to have building blocks. This is a building block. That research component in particular moves us forward on trying to figure out how we can try to solve our opioid problem and our fentanyl problem. And I think that's important. Now let's talk about mandatory minimums. This bill does not do anything on mandatory minimums. What it does is that it adds fentanyl analogs to that Schedule 1 for all the reasons I previously stated. If it were to deal with, if we want to have a discussion, Mr. Chairman, on mandatory minimums, I'm open to that, but Energy and Commerce is not the committee that comes out of. That's Judiciary. This bill is an Energy and Commerce bill because it deals with the analogs and the science involved. This is not the bill for dealing with mandatory minimums. It's a debate we as a society ought to have. It's a debate that at some point this Congress ought to have. But a overall, overarching mandatory minimum discussion needs to take place in the Judiciary Committee. It needs to be well thought out, and it needs to be studied in depth. And I know that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, while they may agree with the principles of this bill, they want to tackle that one too. Perhaps they could have done that in the last Congress. It is a serious issue, though. I do not want to underscore that it is not, but we used to have a saying in the Virginia legislature when I was there, and it was that, if this bill, gets close but it's not quite what you want, and it wouldn't be germane to add something like mandatory minimums to it, we used to say to each other, well, get your own bill. We'd be happy to look at it, but get your own bill. This bill does what I said. It's a building block. It helps us move forward. It permanently schedules fentanyl analogs, and it creates what I consider to be a very valuable component in that it allows us to get the research done to see if there's something out there in the other analogs that might be helpful going down the road. And that's an important step as well. So I think it's a great bill, and I would hope that this committee would forward it to the floor in its current form.
Thank you very much.